We'd like to welcome you all back to the Planet One podcast. Your host is with you, orbiting from outer space around the globe. Greg Angello with you on an absolutely beautiful Saturday. It is February 11th, the day before Super Bowl Sunday. But we want to welcome you all back here, and we hope that you are all doing well. We've got a guest coming in. We're going to be talking about him in just a bit. He had reached out to me. Brenden is a top communicator on YouTube. He's got a YouTube channel. We'll have that info as well for you. And we're going to talk about jib-jabbing? No. Talking? Yeah. Communication? Spot on. So MasterTalk is the platform that he has. And we're going to find out more about him, how it all gets started, why he's even doing it, how he's getting all these people coming into his channel. We've been talking about this for about maybe 2 weeks now. We've got him on the planet. Brenden Kumarasamy is with us on a beautiful Saturday. Brenden, it's so nice to have you here. And so,
Greg, the pleasure's absolutely mine, man. Thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, today my day was mostly coaching in the morning, then a couple more podcasts to go, and then enjoying time with my family. So yeah, it's going to be a great Saturday. How about you?
Well, I've been doing some work, made some calls. We got Super Bowl Sunday tomorrow, so we're talking about that. And maybe we can talk about what you think, if you're into the game or not. I don't know. But before we get into some of these questions, this kind of blows me away because everyone listening, Brenden and I, we don't know each other, but Brenden, as I've been saying, has got a great YouTube channel called MasterTalk, and I really encourage you to go there. We'll have all that information up on the platform, and you can check out all those videos. We only have a little bit of time, limited time, so there's a lot I want to talk to you about. You had reached out to me a little while ago, and what prompted you to do that?
Yeah, for sure, Greg. I always like to go on podcasts because I love meeting new types of people, and communication is relevant for pretty much any podcast. So that's why we reached out to see what we could share, what we could collaborate on.
You are going around, as you are, building, obviously you're trying to build your business. Is that sort of what this is, what MasterTalk is? And if you want to explain a little bit about like why you started MasterTalk and where do you see it going, and how do you put it all together?
For sure, Greg. So today it is a business, but it didn't start that way. So the story behind the channel was when I was in college and university, I went to business school, and I studied literally the opposite of what you would think I would study to do what I do today, which is accounting. So I was an accounting major, and I literally graduated in accounting. So that was my goal at the time, was to become a CPA, just go work at an accounting firm and live my life that way. And then during my studies, I competed in these things called case competitions, Greg. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So all the guys my age are playing football or soccer, or rugby. I was one of those guys. It's too dangerous for me. So I did presentations professionally. That's how I learned how to speak. But then as I got older, I started coaching all the students in colleges just to help them with speaking. I wasn't charging them anything. I didn't know what a coach was, honestly. I was just figuring it out on the spot. And I just accidentally got really good at it. And then a few years later, somebody gave me the idea to start a YouTube channel because all of the information that I was sharing with them wasn't available for free on the internet. So I started MasterTalk as a hobby in my mom's basement, actually, Greg. So I was just putting videos out, and then a few years later, it turned into what it is.
So did your mom know what you were doing down there? Or she's like, Brenden, what you doing down there?
I told her, but she didn't really understand at the beginning. She was like, "You're a consultant at IBM. Like, what are you doing making videos?" Like, it's just a hobby. And it literally was a hobby at the beginning. I was never interested in entrepreneurship. It was too risky for me. But things just worked out in the right ways, and I met the right partners. And I noticed that I could actually spend 100% of my time doing this instead of 20%.
So let's go back a little bit before MasterTalk started. So where are you originally from?
Course. So my parents are from Sri Lanka, which is a country south of India. So they immigrated from Sri Lanka in the early 90s. But I was born and raised in Montreal, and I haven't left the city since I was born.
Oh, okay. Because I think you said on one of the YouTube videos that English is not your native language, correct?
That's correct. Technically, my native language is French. So what happened, Greg, for those who don't know, is that in Montreal, you need to know how to speak French to be successful in the city. And I obviously didn't know the language. So my parents sent me to French education systems. I actually studied my whole life in French, from like kindergarten all the way up to college. The only reason I'm so fluent in English is because prior to being in kindergarten in French, I actually did 2-3 years of daycare when I was 2 or 3 years old. And that was an English daycare. So that's how I picked up the language.
So you learned baby talk first. In daycare, right? You learn how to talk like that. You know, I have a 7-year-old, But it's an interesting thing because framing communication. You started teaching or helping other students in their work, right? So did like something just go off in your head? Was there, said, you know what, I think this is probably something I want to do? Or what else had to change in your life for you to move into that?
Yeah, so that was definitely a big piece. Like for me, MasterTalk was an accident in many ways, Greg, in the sense that, by the way, the reason I'm always saying Greg, because I always mispronounce Greg and Craig, so I always have to. That's what's
You just go, hey man.
Yeah, hey man,
Hey man.
yeah man. So in my last semester of college, I was never set on becoming an entrepreneur. MasterTalk still didn't exist, but I'd coached 60 people on how to speak. Not because I was great at coaching, because I was great at speaking. So I started speaking really well, and then I would start coaching these people, and they're like, "What you're saying doesn't work, Brenden." So I had to go back to the drawing board every time, and I kind of just invented my own tricks. And then in my last semester, somebody asked me the question that changed my trajectory significantly. It was one of the people I'd coached, and he just said, "Hey, Brenden, how did you learn how to speak?" And I was like, "What do you mean, dude?" Yeah, how did you learn how to communicate? Like, did you hire a coach? Did you do Toastmasters? And I looked at him and I was like, no, my parents are factory workers. Obviously, I can't afford any of that stuff. Even Toastmasters, like $100 a year. I even have $100 in my pocket. So I was like, no, I didn't do that. He was like, well, how did you learn? I was like, oh, I just did it myself. And then he asked me, hey, well, did you watch YouTube videos on speaking? And then I got confused. I was like, what YouTube videos on speaking? So I had 4 months to kill before I started working at IBM, which was my focus. I wanted to be an executive of the company. That was the goal. And then I just started watching the videos of other people creating content who are largely in their 50s, who had PhDs in communication, who are my friends now. But at the beginning, I was a little bit more immature, so I saw them as my quote unquote competitors. And I would look at their videos and go, ew, like this is so bad. Like this is not energetic. It's not good for the younger generation. A lot of these tips are too academic. So I just found a lot of holes in what they were sharing. And I just had the naivete to think I could do better. So I just pulled out a phone and started making videos.
Yeah. So how long ago was that?
So I had the initial idea for MasterTalk in December of 2018. I've been coaching since I was 19, and I started the channel in Jan 2019.
But when you started talking to other students and then maybe you decided that this was going to be a better path for you, like how many years ago was that before MasterTalk started?
Where I wanted to do this. Yeah, we're talking like, so I started coaching in 2015, 16, but for the 3 years I was coaching, I never intended it as a business or a career. Like all those 60 people, Greg, I think that's why I became successful so quickly at the business, was because I was just coaching out of my heart. Like I was just like, oh, this is just what I do. Like it just brings me joy. I never thought it was a business. And then in 2019, when I started making videos, it still wasn't a business. Not because I'm a philanthropist or anything, or I'm Jesus. It's because I was making good money at IBM, right? I was making really good money for the first time in my life, in my family's life, for that. So for that reason, so my first year, I had no intention of quitting corporate. I'm making six figures. I'm going to take all that money and pay off my family debt because he had like 20, 30 grand to pay off. So that was my responsibility now. So I just started paying off the debt. I was just making videos for fun, kind of like how somebody goes to the gym every week to work out. That was like me with MasterTalk. But then 9 months into MasterTalk, which is December of 2019. So once again, this is not too long ago. We're talking 3-4 years ago here. I got really lucky in life. I went to Columbus, Ohio to go see Lewis Howes give a conference, who's the host of the School of Greatness podcast. He's a big hero of mine. And I met my business partner there, who's 20 years older than I am. And he looked at my channel and he said, you could charge executives thousands of dollars to work with you. And I started laughing at him. Greg, excuse me. I was looking at it. I was like, come on, man. No one's going to pay a 23-year-old with the age I was at the time thousands of dollars. He's like, of course they will. Why don't you go help my clients? And that's how I built my first book of business and realized it was a business.
So that was like one of the things I wanted to ask you is because you have information now that came from somebody else, right? So that information has been transcended to you. And that's what we do. I have my own coach in real estate. And my coach is a coach, and his coach is a coach, and so forth. So all that trickles down. It's like trickle down coaching economics, right? It all comes down, and then you pick it up. And that's how kind of like that works, because you have people that obviously that you want to listen to, that's going to, make you either better communicator or, make you more successful, right? And they're probably telling you, do this, don't do that. This is where you want to go. But the reason why I ask you about when a lot of this started, because what do you think about over the last 5 years? Do you think that communication has changed in the last 5 years or so, or maybe more, because of the way technology is so rapidly moving? What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a great question, man. The way I think about it is it's not really that technology has changed us in a drastic way. I think it's more of the idea of convenience. So, for example, let's say 20 years ago, if you wanted to ask somebody on a date, and obviously you know this better than I do because 20 years ago I was like 6 years old, is when you want to ask on a date, there's no app, there's no Bumble, there's no Facebook, there's no Tinder. You have to just go up to the person and ask them out, or else you don't get dates and you don't get what you're looking for, which is a relationship potentially. Whereas today, it's not that human beings have suddenly disevolved or gotten worse over time. It's just that the convenience factor is just a big piece here. Now I have the optionality of choosing between, do I go out into the wild and ask out a girl who might be single, might be in a relationship, might be sort of married, might have a boyfriend that she's on and off with, or I just go to Bumble and I just swipe. So it's just easier. So because of that optionality, another easy example, texting versus phone calls. 20 years
Mhm.
ago, texting doesn't exist. You have to get on phone calls with people. Whereas now there's just a better convenience factor. And for that reason, just due to the rise of technology, we're just communicating less with our mouths on average. So our communication ability has definitely disintegrated over time.
So, do you think that communication is more difficult now with the advance of technology and texting and different platforms, different chat rooms and things like that? So, you don't really have to, you can mask yourself, right? Somebody else. So, what do you think about
Absolutely.
that? So, you think communication is more difficult now than it used to be?
I see it more as a double-edged sword. So one side of the sword is actually really, really positive that people don't talk about enough, and the other side is more of we need to ramp up a little bit more, which we're going to talk about today. What are the tips? It's just easy to implement, and that's the key. So one side of the sword is saying the rise of technology, and I believe is largely a benefit rather than a hindrance, and I'll tell you why. The reason is because it's a lot easier to find your tribe. So, for example, if
Mm.
podcasting exists, the statistical likelihood of me and you meeting, Greg, is literally next to zero. It's literally next to zero.
It's like
Because if
me
there's no
playing. It's like me playing in the Super Bowl. Probably not going to happen.
Me too, by the way, because I got a crooked left arm. So I ain't playing in the Super Bowl either. So there's a guy, I forgot his name is, but he calls it ETCs. It's like excuses to connect. So we have an excuse to connect. Oh, there's a podcast, and then we become friends and we have a show and we do an episode together. So because of that, in that way, social media allows us, if we use the tool in the right way, to actually find the people that we're excited about. Lewis's conference is a great example of this. Lewis has a podcast, everyone listens to the podcast, and the people who go to the conference listen to the podcast. So if I go there, it's like I meet everybody I was supposed to meet in my life in one setting because of the internet. So there's a positive. But the hindrance is because we're speaking less on average, we have to push our skills, our verbal skills, more so with exercises and prompts and video messages to just level up our skills just a little bit more. That's all.
Okay. I'll give you the floor. I'll give you the audience. Everyone's listening right now. If you want to go through some tips, you want to go through what you want to lay out there.
So the tips is, let's start with the context, which is communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time, right? So one of those balls is eye contact, one of those balls is facial expressions, one of those balls is storytelling, body language, and it could get really confusing really fast. So for me, the question has always been, Greg, what are the three easiest balls to juggle in the air? Because if we could focus on those three, and this is for everybody, it doesn't matter if you're a CEO of a company, you could be a working employee, a student, this applies across the board. Is if we juggle these three balls, we'll gain momentum in that skill set, that other part of the double-edged sword we talked about. So let's start with number one. What is ball one? The random word exercise. Exercise is simple. Pick a word like highlighter, like pencil, like trophy case, like home, and create a random presentation out of thin air. That's it. Just create random presentations out of thin air. This serves two main purposes, Greg. One is that it helps you deal with uncertainty. Because guess what? Life is filled with it. Like when you're meeting somebody new at a party or at an event, you don't go to that conversation and say, okay, these are the lists of questions we're going to be asking each other, and then we're going to go through this conversation. Like, no, it's what's up? And then the conversation starts. And then the second purpose to the random word exercise is that if you can make sense out of nonsense, you could make sense out of anything. That's really the magic. So I encourage all of you listening to this podcast, do this in the shower. I'm hoping, Greg, I really am, that everybody listening to this podcast showers every day. So if you shower every day, you got 15 minutes in the shower that you're not doing anything with. So just do the random word exercise there. If you got children, you got a 7-year-old, perfect, right? Do the random word exercise with her. Have her give you a random word. You're already a great communicator. This is actually going to be super fun for you. And you do radio or something. Actually, she doesn't know what a radio is, so she's probably going to give you like a breakfast or something. So you're going to say breakfast, and then you're going to give her a word, like a doll or ballet or dancing or something. And you're going to watch her do the random word exercise. And it's fun, and you're integrating the practice schedule into her life too. So that's exercise number 1.
All right. Well, you said there was 3 keys. What do you got? Here we go.
So everyone's different, right? Some people like it that I go through all 3 right away. Other people like to comment in between. That's why I always stop after the first one. So the second one is the question drill. So all of us get asked questions in our life. At work, at school, at home, or in my case, and in your case, on podcasts, we get asked questions all the time. But most of us are reactive to those questions. We're not proactive. I'll give you an example. So a few years ago, when I started guesting on shows, I was horrible. Like, it was terrible. I remember some guy asked me, where does the fear of communication come from? And I looked at him, and I was like, I don't know, dude. Los Angeles? New York? London? So I didn't know how to answer the question, so I just said a joke, and I was like, yeah, I guess communication fear is like from a city or something. So what did I do differently? Every single day, man, what I did is I spent 5 minutes answering one question that I thought somebody was going to ask me about communication, and implement. Not, you don't do it with communication for yourself. Do it with your field. For in your case, it's real estate, right? For somebody else listening to this podcast, it's about being a better parent for their family. It doesn't matter, right? But if you do that every single day for a year, you'll have answered 365 questions about your expertise. You'll be bulletproof with only 5 minutes of work. And then finally, exercise number 3 is just video messages. It's so simple, nobody does it. Pick 3 people that you love in your life, people you really appreciate, and just send them a 20-second video message to say, hey, Greg, I'm really thinking about you. Love everything that you're doing with the podcast. Love the impact you're creating with the world. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. I'm so grateful to have you in my life. That's it. It's so simple.
Yeah, 100%.
And what's great about,
yep.
Yeah, and what's great about the video message is that people aren't paying attention to the mistakes you're making in the video. They aren't saying, you know what, Brenden, you made all these mistakes. You said a bunch of filler words. I'm going to catch you next time you send me a video message. That's not what you get. 100% of the time what you get is, wow, I've never received a video message before. Brenden really cares about me. And I'd love for all of us to give that feeling to somebody else. That's it.
Yeah, I think over the last 5-6 years, maybe a little bit more than that, that is, the video messaging is more prevalent now in real estate, communicating, than before. Because one, the competition is so fierce.
Yes.
That's really what it is. And so if you don't learn different skills or how to be better at it, then someone else is going to be. And the other thing I think that's important, because I do a lot of phone call prospecting. So my job is to call you and build a relationship with you as soon as possible. I mean, I've been able to try to learn not only how to get you to respond to me without hanging up, but I need to know what your personality is, what your disc number is. Are you a D, you're an I, you're an S, you're a C? And that's why I have a coach to go through those processes to learn that. But what's interesting with many, many people that I talk to, especially when I call an expired or withdrawn. I had a guy yesterday I talked to. He goes, I spoke to 40 people called me yesterday about my property. He said, you're the only one that asked me how I'm doing. Everyone else is, so do you want to sell your house? Do you really think you can do it on your own? And he got offended because we look at it this way. Think about this. Do you listen to respond or do you listen to understand? And when I started learning that you need to listen to understand versus what I'm going to say, that really changed the game for me. So what do you think about that?
I think you're absolutely right. And by the way, I just respect your hustle. Even now, you're still hustling and cold calls. I'm scared to death of cold calling. All of my business is inbound and some outbound, but not cold calling. So I love that, man. I love the hustle. And you're absolutely right. It's all about realizing that listening is the key component here. But there's a couple of points to listening that I feel isn't touched upon, so let's jump into that. The first one is a lesson I got from one of my mentors, Steve Hardison, and he always says this, and it's a great frame whenever we're thinking, is whenever we're listening to somebody in general, it doesn't have to be business, just life in general with our family, are we listening for the judgment or are we listening for the gold? And when I say listening, it's listening for the information, right? So if you're listening for the judgment, then you're listening for the information. If you're listening for the information, then you're listening for the gold. And when I say listening for the information, then you're listening for the information. So if you're listening for the information, then you're listening for the information. If you're listening for the information, then you're listening for the information. So if you're listening for the information, then you're listening for the information. Are we listening for the judgment, or are we listening for the gold? A lot of times when we listen to other people, Greg, the philosophy is, well, I already know this. Oh, we already know that. Well, I guess that makes sense, but I would do this differently. So we always bring these judgments into it. We're listening to people versus going, especially with our partners or significant others. Oh, okay, I know that, babe. You told me that last week. Versus going, what's the gold here? How can I listen to the goal? So always search for that. The other piece is, how do we listen more deeply? There's not really a practical exercise on how to listen because everyone just says, listen more. Okay, well, what does that mean? So let me give you one that anyone can implement tomorrow. All you have to do is pick a friend that you really admire in your life, a buddy of yours, somebody that you're on a growth journey with. So a great example is, let's say you and your buddy are both listening to this podcast together. That's a great example. Or somebody's listening to it separately. Here's what I want you to do with that person. Book a 45-minute one-on-one conversation with just that individual and do what I call a goals call. So what is a goals call? Goals call is just, I'll just role play this really quickly out loud, is let's say I was doing this with you, Greg. What I would do is I would just ask you, what are your top 3 goals for this year? And why are those 3 goals important to you? So you're going to spend 2 minutes, you're going to write down all these goals, tell you why it's important. But I'm only allowed to do 2 things for the next 45 minutes. I'm only allowed to restate what you said. So I would respond with something like, okay, Greg, what I heard was your top 3 goals for this year with this, and these are why are important to you. Did I get that correctly? And then you go, yes, Brenden, thanks. And I forgot to mention this, blah, 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 blah. And then the second thing I'm allowed to do is I'm allowed to ask clarification questions about your goals. So I'll say questions like, tell me more. That's the most powerful question in my Rolodex. Just tell me more. Tell me more about that. Why is that bothering you? Why is that important to you? Just tell me more. And you always get more insights. And the second one is just clarification. So let's say you tell me your goal is to do better in business this year. Obviously, you'll be more specific because you already have a coach. You're a lot more proficient. But let's just say it's do better in business. So I'll apply with, that's great, Greg. I love that. What kind of numbers are you talking? How many houses do you want to close this year? How many houses did you close last year? And what's the difference do you want to get? So I'm just going to ask you questions. But there's a third rule. And the third rule is you are not allowed throughout the whole duration of the 45-minute call to give advice or to coach the other person. You're not allowed to give advice. The only thing you're allowed doing is asking them question after question after question, writing down, restating, question. If you do that for a few weeks, you'll be a monster at listening.
Well, that's really interesting because some of the scripts that we have, I'll use his name, Tom Ferry. So Tom Ferry is really big. I don't know if you know him or not, but
yeah. Tom's great.
And a lot of that is restating, Mr. Seller, you said that you want to be moving out of your house in the next 30 days. Is that correct? They start saying, yep, that's right. Yep, that's right. So I think that's really good. One thing, though, you brought up about judgment, and I want you to give me, if you can, give me an example of what that is.
For sure. So judgments, it takes a wide range of different perspectives, right? So one example could be, let's say you're talking to a significant other, and they ask you, I don't know, to take out the trash. But what you're hearing is not, oh, this is really important to my partner, I should really do this. What you're hearing, because you have a bunch of other things going on in your life, not you in particular, but just life people, is they'll go, oh, well, she always tells me, she's always nagging me all the time. Why is she always judging me? Why is she always, doesn't she know that I'm busy? So we have all of these stories in our mind that are always playing, even if we don't want to admit it. And that is what Steve refers to as, quote unquote, the judgment, right? But it can take different forms. For other people, it could be, I'm too busy to listen to her today. It could be, well, let's say you were learning from a coach. People do this all the time, even if they invest in coaches. They go, well, I already know this. And then somebody goes, well, do you know this or are you implementing this? Like the video messages is so good. Oh, well, I already know about the video messages. Right? Why do you keep telling me about them? Well, it's because you're not doing them. Right? So that's an example of a judgment versus the goal. So the goal is more saying in an educational context to make it easier, I might know a lot of this, but what's one thing that Greg is going to teach me today that I don't know or that I'm not implementing? So I'm always listening to them. And I actually do that with every time I'm listening to someone. Like for you, the big lesson I got from just listening to you in this conversation is, wow, like you're much older than me. You could just call it quits. I'm sure you've already been very successful in real estate, and yet you're still cold calling. You still have the energy of a 20-year-old, and that puts a fire up my ass to go, well, I'm lazy compared to this guy. I need to level up my game.
This is the language button.
Bad. I'll
that's
keep
all right.
it.
No, that's okay. I want to ask you this question. Out of all the tools that we have, speaking is one of them, but what do you think is the most the one thing that we have that can cause the most harm to another.
In relation to speaking or just life in general?
So let's just say that you were going to go battle with somebody. You have things that you want to do a battle with. What do you think is the one that can do the most harm in battle?
So do you want me to weaponize people into harming others? Is that what you're saying? Okay, fascinating. I mean, there's different layers you can go about this. One is the psychological harm, which is our words. Negative talk has a big impact on who we are. Then there's obviously physical harm, which I obviously don't recommend people to partake in. But really focusing on communication, the words we say matter. I'll give you an example that one of my friends gave me. Her name's Dunya. She coaches a lot of teachers on how to communicate better with their students. And she says the labels that we give our children are a lot more powerful than we think in both senses of the word. So if you go up to a 7-year-old and you always tell that 7-year-old that you're a powerful, that you're a champion, that you're going to do great things with your life, that is the label that we're assigning to that person. So that person believes that that's what they're capable of. But if you were a kid in a classroom and your math teacher in 2nd grade called you stupid, or that you're too slow, or that you're not catching up to the other students in class, and all of us have had that, right? In our life in some way, shape, or form. Unfortunately, those labels stick with us too as we get older. Like if we were always told that we weren't good in school, we think that school is the only way to be successful in life, and that's what we end up believing later, and that's what brings out. So I think that's a great example of the harm we can cause with our words, and this is something I'm still working on as well, and I'm very cautious about that when I talk to other people, is really making sure that I'm not assigning negative labels that aren't true. So it's like telling a fish that you can't climb. Well, who cares? You don't need to climb as a fish, but the fish will always think they're a loser because they can't climb a tree or something.
Exactly. So I think that what I was trying to move you to, and you hit it right on there, is that it's our tongue that is really our most divisive weapon that we have. You have your fist, you have your knees, you can have, samurai sword. But you know what starts wars? Is what we say, our talking, right? Just like when you went back to judgment. And so when you're coaching people and you're listening to them, if you start hearing a lot of negativity in their conversation, what is your goal? Are you trying to make people, like, one is to be a better communicator, but how do you get them to be because it's very easy for us to be so negative all the time. How do you get people to be more positive in their speech so that people will say, you know what, that's the nicest thing I've ever heard from anyone today? What do you think about that?
Love that. I love that question. So there's 2 parts to that, since you mentioned coaching specifically. So one big part that I had to mature into, by the way, I definitely wasn't doing this when I was starting, is we need to love people where they are in their journey. And what that means is if they're being really negative, that's okay. We need to accept that to a certain extent. Yeah, that's one part of it. So in other words, we shouldn't get impatient as coaches or as people when they don't live up to our expectations of who we want them to be. So that's one part, which I think is really important. The other part is to acknowledge the balls that they're already juggling in that journey. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm working with somebody at the beginning of their journey, Greg, and they're really negative, but they're implementing the first ball, which is the random word exercise. I keep it really simple at the beginning, just like throw that ball in the air. So I won't mention the fact that Alyssa, I'm just sort of throwing a random word, is being negative all the time. I'm not going to mention it at the beginning. But then when Alyssa is managing that ball and saying, hey, I'm really good at this, I feel that confidence, her energy starts to change, which is the most important thing when I'm speaking. It's not really about, did I master my ums and ahs? It's more, is my energy towards speaking changing from anxiety, stress, I hate this, to exciting. Wow, I can't wait to come to class. I can't wait to learn more about speaking. So that's one piece. And then as the number of balls that she's throwing in the air, the juggling balls, as they start to increase to 3, 4, 5, she's doing the question drills, sending video message. Then we get to a place in her career, in her journey as a communicator, where she has now attained the maturity where I can come to her and say, hey, Alyssa, I've been noticing that you're really negative whenever you talk about yourself, and more, it's always towards themselves. It's not really towards other people that much. And that's affecting the way that you're growing. And then when she realized that she's more mature and she's saying, you know what, this sucks, but I can work on it now. So that's how I think about it.
I like that. So I've been part of this group for maybe about 2 years now. So we have a mindset motivation group that we have. So we do it every morning, 8:15. We do it for 30 minutes. And I think we have over 300 now that are coming on from different parts of the country. But we had someone that started coming in. And you probably do a lot of Zoom video things, most of the people don't even have their screen on, right? You don't see them. And this person wasn't even talking at all. And so during one of the mindset motivation calls, I just called her out. You've been on here for about 2-3 weeks now. Who are you? And she opened up her video and she started talking. And then she became a leader, and she would lead on a certain morning. But here's what happened to her. She had so much negativity going on in her life, and in the job that she had, in the sales job, she said that she couldn't talk. She basically couldn't talk anymore. That's how bad it was. And I've never really met anyone before that couldn't talk. Have you ever had anybody like that? And if you have, how do you work with them?
For sure, Greg. That's the fantastic question. And thanks for the work that you do, by the way. I think that's magical that she's now leading those groups. And you actually gave the answer in your question, which is A, loving people where they are in the journey, and B, giving them small wins that they accumulate over time. Of course, and I'm always honest about this just because now I'm a little bit more mature in the industry. If someone's too negative, I just can't work with them. It just doesn't make sense energetically for me because there's just too many clients, there's too many people now. So I have to be pickier or else my energy will go to zero and I'll just like fire myself from the industry. So there's that too. But I think the other piece is if I believe they're negative but not negative enough where I can't change them, where I can change them rather, then we start with that. Here's a couple of exercises for just energy in general, which is a little away from speaking, but I think it's still relevant, which is an exercise we teach called the bliss list. So the bliss list is all you have to do is you make a couple of notes on a notepad and you just write down the 3 to 5 things in your life, the little things, not the big things, that bring you joy every single day of your life. So I'll give you an example with me. I dance in between my meetings because I have a bunch of them, so it keeps me energized. I can karaoke in 8 different languages, so I always like singing alone in my basement, even if per se I don't sing that well. Just fun for me. And I like getting dinners with people on a Friday night. Just any dinner. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, just like a hot dog, poutine. Oh, you don't know what poutine is, right? It's like a Quebec, it's like a Montreal specialty where you got like French fries, cheese turds, and gravy all over. It's amazing. It's
Sounds so healthy, man.
Yeah, it's super healthy. Yeah, it's super healthy. Thankfully, I'm not a health expert. So you get the idea, right? It's what are those little things? Is it like a little ice cream? Is it, if you're more introverted, is it reading a book alone? For me, it's also listening to a podcast. I'm at like an hour or two. I do like 8 to 10 hours a week of listening to podcasts of like just other people's shows. And what happens is when we implement these little things, it brings us joy in small little ways and helps us retake control of our lives. So I love that exercise, and I always recommend it to people as well.
Well, we have a few minutes left, and I did want to ask you a personal question. So you did say some things like you sing karaoke in 8, 9 different languages, and
Correct.
Here's a very important question. What's your favorite cereal?
My favorite cereal? Is that like TV show?
What's your, no, like breakfast cereal?
Oh, breakfast cereal. So I actually do intermittent fasting, so I don't really eat a lot of breakfast. But if I had to pick a cereal, what did I used to eat as a kid? It's these, I forgot the name is. They have like little honey nuts, not Cheerios, but it's like there's like these little bushels of honey nuts, and there's flakes, and it's
Like
all
the
like
Honey
a
Nuts
little
and Oats? Yeah?
something
Okay.
like that. Yeah, so I like that.
I just want to throw you off your game to see if you're able to handle that question. So,
Okay.
I mean, listen, at the beginning we talked about boogers, and now we're talking about cereal. So I think it's right in line. Moving forward, where do you see yourself now with everything that you've done over the last 3 to 5 years? Like, where do you see MasterTalk? Where do you want it to go? And what plans do you have for yourself in the future?
For sure, Greg. For me, in a nutshell, I believe that it's my destiny to democratize communication for the world. So for me, the future is, yeah, my coaching business will grow. Yeah, I'll get more clients. All that will be great. But for me, the next Elon Musk is a 7-year-old girl who can't afford a coach. So for me, a lot of my focus, I reinvest a lot of the capital for my coaching business, and I'm very fortunate, been able to find that success early in the game rather than later. I reinvest a lot of that into the YouTube channel, into LinkedIn, into Instagram, into these platforms where we can reach a wider group of people so that when I'm gone, people can learn from me forever. I think the tragedy of Dale Carnegie's work, even if the guy's an amazing figure and he's done so well in the communication space, is he was born in the wrong time period of history, right? Because we don't hear how Dale Carnegie sounds like. He was never on a podcast because these technologies didn't exist. Whereas I get an opportunity in this lifetime to finish what he started. So yeah, I'm super excited about that.
What else? Are you single?
Like I said, what else? Yeah, I'm still single. And the reason is just because I've actually never been in a relationship. So for me, my 20s, the way that I've consciously chosen my life, I found when I look at the people I admire, a lot of them make a lot of mistakes in relationships. Because as we get older, our criteria of who makes the right partner changes quite a bit. Like when I was 15, it's like, oh, if she has a nice smile, she's like the perfect person for me. I'll spend the next 50 years with her. And now it's like, well, is she growth minded? Does she want to learn? And I'm really scared that my business will fail. Even if I've had success, I'm not at the point yet where it's like, okay, I'm shelling out gajillions of dollars here. And I went through a lot of pain in my childhood because my parents didn't have a lot of money when they raised me. And I just don't want that pain onto my children. So a lot of my focus for the next 2 to 3 years will be really shelling off the balance sheet, making the business really, really work. And I'm grateful it's going in the right direction. And then I'll start dating mercilessly until I find the right person.
See, when people start listening to this, the women in there, they're not going to be flocking you. Like, oh, he's single. Yeah. So now you're going to be getting all this. So we got to get your contact information right now. Now, if people want to find out more about you, more about MasterTalk, or get into your coaching platform, what do they do?
For sure, man. This is such a delight, by the way. Thanks for having me on the show, man.
You're
This is
welcome.
super fun. And sorry for swearing. It was also 2 ways to keep in touch.
That's all right.
The first one is the YouTube channel. So just go to Master Talk in one word. You'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to speak. And the second way to keep in touch is I do a free Zoom call every 2 weeks that's live and interactive where you get to see me present a 90-minute workshop. And there's kids who come to this call, like 8-year-olds. There's big CEOs of companies who come to this call. It's a party that everyone's invited to. So if you want to jump in on that, go to rockstarcommunicator.com and just register for an next free training.
And you're on LinkedIn too.
Yes, if you can spell my name and find me, I'm more than happy to answer any DMs on LinkedIn.
I will say this though, you are engaging because there are people that go to the YouTube channel and you see all the stuff that's going on, and a lot of people like to respond, right? So they put something in there. You never hear anything. Is there anybody there, right? Try to get hold of these people, to try to communicate with them, to get them on to do a podcast. But I will say this, that you reached out right away. I a little message for you on your YouTube channel, Master Talk, and got the thumbs up and all that. So I appreciate that. Listen, man, I really appreciate you coming in on a Saturday. I know you got a lot going on for the rest of the day and the weekend. So are you going to watch the Super Bowl? Any plans for that?
I am, and I'm hoping the Eagles take it home. I think Jalen's had a great season, and I think he's really, really impressed a lot of people who thought he wasn't going to make it to the Super Bowl. So I really hope he takes it, because Patrick's already gotten the bowl, but it's going to be a tough one. It's going to be close, that's for sure.
Well, give me the score. What do you think?
The score?
Give me your prediction. Give me the score.
I am like the opposite. I think it's definitely going to be close. I'll give it 30-27 for the Eagles.
Interesting.
And I'm sure the score is going to be off. I'm not that good at prediction. I'm a lot better at fighting. Like, I'm a huge UFC fan. I watch every card. Like tonight is, obviously people won't know this because this is a recording. Tonight is a massive fight, and that I do predictions all across the board because you just pick who wins. So I'm really excited by that.
My 7-year-old's prediction for the Super Bowl: Philadelphia 63, Kansas City Chiefs 25.
63? How can he even score that many points in 4 quarters?
He's just learning his numbers.
Yeah, that's
He's just learning his numbers. First quarter, 125. No, I don't think they're going to score that many. Anyway, it's a lot of fun. But I put that out on YouTube. That's on my podcast channel. All right, man. Brenden, thank you so much for being with us. It is great to meet you, and glad we had this connection and being able to communicate with one another. And we thank you for all being here, man. I wish you a great rest of your weekend and your journey with MasterTalk. Thanks for being part of us.
Appreciate it. It was a treat.
Appreciate you. Hope you enjoyed this one. Love to hear your comments. And if you want to learn how to podcast and do this thing, I'll be more than happy to talk to you. Podcast University on Planet One. So that's it. We're going to wrap it up for this day and time. We wish you all the best. Take care of one another. For Planet One, Greg Angello on the Freedom Network. Take care. See you all soon.